Hey, I'm Josh, and I'm the host of Beyond the Numbers. As you've seen over the last few weeks, we talked about a lot of deep issues, and as I've stated during this week's episode, this is kind of the clutch episode. We've talked a lot about the different things that can happen that can cause church hurt, as we've seen trending so much. Well, this episode, we're talking about how do we rebuild trust after the church hurt. This is the healing process that we really need to work on so we're not left destroyed. And today I'm joined with an awesome guest. Her name is Kristen, and Kristen's going to share a bit of her story, but she also has a fantastic background, lots of experience. Thank you for being here, Kristen.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. And she has a podcast, and that's actually how I came across her originally. Talks about some really great stuff, and she'll talk about her podcast. In fact, tell us a little bit about what you do, your podcast, life, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so like Josh said, I'm Kristen, and in case you couldn't tell, I'm from the South. I'm from Tennessee. Lots of Appalachian roots over here.
Yes. Do you use yonder?
I do. Yonder, y'all, fixing to, all of it.
Fixing. Okay.
I'm fixing to be there. Yep. I wear a lot of hats. I am, first and foremost, I'm a daughter of the King. I am a wife, a mama. I am a full-time high school counselor. I'm also a teen confidence coach. And like Josh said, I host a podcast. It's called Anxious Christian Teen, which is pretty self-explanatory. I work with Christian teen girls who struggle with things like anxiety and insecurity, that constant pressure to feel good enough. And I work with them to learn how to regulate their emotions, build their confidence up, and just really reconnect with their faith. My passion, it comes from walking alongside girls like that for so many years who are just really overwhelmed, and helping them see that faith it's our source of safety. It's not just something to try and measure up to, or another reason to stress.
And I'm sure working with teenagers, and if anyone's watching this that maybe you work with teens or you do next gen ministry or whatever, you know that occasionally there is a teen that experiences a little bit of an anxiety. It's kind of a rare thing with students. In fact, I have a book that I've been reading that's like the most anxious generation.
Yes.
And so I'm sure you have a great audience, but also I'm sure you're ministering to a lot of people because it is such an epidemic that's running rampant among our students. And it's great when we have especially Christians that can pour into that, because there's so much. I mean, the world can help, but in the same aspect, sometimes the world's answers are going to lead people down bigger holes than actually pull them out of the hole. And so I appreciate what you're doing and the difference you're making in a lot of these students. Now we'll jump into probably some of that anxiety stuff, but specifically dealing with what we're talking about in this episode, dealing with church hurt. In our conversations, you kind of mentioned that you have a little bit of a journey that you took because of church hurt. So can you share a little bit about that journey and like what a season away from the church looked like for you and your family?
Yes. Unfortunately, I do have experience in this world. My church hurt came after more than, I want to say it was close to 30 years of faithfulness to this same church. And it wasn't just a church that my family attended. We served. My dad was, he was a deacon for a very long time. He was the only deacon there, and he also led the choir. When I was about 14 years old, our piano player at the time left and went to another church, and we didn't have one for a very long time. So I learned to play the piano so that we would have a piano player. My mama taught Sunday school. I filled in for her when she was sick or something like that. We dug in and we stayed. We stuck it out when pastors left. We stayed when there was one point when the congregation dwindled to about 10, And
Goodness.
I mean, we were still there and we were still working and still doing
Being
our
faithful.
best to
Wow.
praise the Lord.
Yeah.
That church, it was not just a part of our family. It was almost like a part of our identity. Then in I'd say it was about 2017, the preacher that was there at the time kind of blindsided us after a service one evening. He didn't include me in the conversation, but he called my mama and my daddy to the back of the church, and he had two men of the church who went with him. Later, we found out that the two men that were included in the meeting did not know what this meeting was even about. Um, so he called these two men and my parents into the back of the church. And of course, I left. I went on home. I had a newborn baby at that time, so we had to get to the house.
Yeah.
um, and when my parents went in the back, he told them that some quote unquote members were uncomfortable with us being there. Well, my daddy, being a deacon and being very familiar with the scripture, he said, okay, well, where are our accusers? He refused to identify who it was that was saying that they had a problem with us.
It was him.
Yes,
Oh,
well, very
real?
close, very close.
Okay.
It was the
Okay.
wife.
Oh my goodness.
Um,
Oh,
yes, the plot thickens. So basically, we weren't given the opportunity to address the situation biblically. We were not given the chance to talk to our accuser face to face. We didn't even know their identity. And like I said, later on, we figured out that it was the preacher's wife, and basically it stemmed from jealousy, and it had to do with music and with singing. Uh, it was unbelievable, unbelievable. That moment, it didn't just hurt. That humiliated us. It it fractured relationships that in some cases were closer to us than our own family, and we never ever thought that they would break. These were our people. We could depend on them. And it created years of bitterness and anger, and of course all of that spilled outside the church walls. It didn't stay in those four walls.
never
It went with
does.
us. And that season, the season that followed, oh, it wasn't just stepping away from a church. It was especially hard for my mama and me. We tend to hold on to our grudges a little bit.
Might have had some experience with that. Yeah.
Not, but
You're not alone.
unfortunately, the whole situation just it drove a wedge between us and God. And I was not able to repair my relationship and truly say it was repaired until about 2023. And that was an especially hard time for me because I had literally been in church and I had been a member of two. So this was my second church that we went to when I was very young, but I had literally been in church since I was 2 weeks old. And I didn't know a life when church didn't feel like my second home. For a very long time, that bitterness, that anger, it made my faith feel very distant and very confusing and just so messed up in ways that I didn't have a clue how to start untangling all of it.
I can only imagine that some of the ones that I've experienced, especially being a youth pastor, unfortunately, you kind of go to different churches. So like, I think the longest church I was at was like 6.5 years, aside from the church that I like grew up in. But I know how it hurt me when those type of things happened, and like you realize how much of your relationship with you was either tied up in the role or was just because you have this leader saying you can't talk to them anymore. you lose out on all those friendships and relationships. I can't imagine, you said like 3 decades. That's huge. Like that's, you guys have grown up together. That,
Yes,
not
absolutely.
to deepen it, but like, I mean, that's gotta be hard.
It was.
And so like with that, I know for a lot of people, especially when it comes to church hurt, and a lot of these people that we're seeing with these hashtags like ex-evangelical, deconstruction and all that kind of stuff. I know with a lot of those, not all of them, but with some of them, it stems from the church hurt. And for some people, and I think I've been there before, and maybe a listener has, what you said was you almost kind of add God to the mix because they're his people, because it's his church. We identify that hurt and kind of put that label on him. And it can cause people to have their relationships with him just kind of torn apart because it was his people that misrepresented him. So, like, what did that look like for you personally, having to maybe over time eventually separate God from those that misrepresented him and learning to trust God, even if it was hard to trust the church again?
At first, I couldn't separate them at all. In my heart, God and the church and the people, well, the church, it is the people. It's not the building. So, they were one. So when the church rejected us, it really felt like God had rejected us. And sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
it felt like it felt like God had allowed that hurt and that embarrassment, and that he was almost okay with it. Um, oh, for a long time I wrestled with questions like, how could God let this happen to us after we had been so faithful for so long? And I didn't realize it at the time, and Lord forgive me, but I was operating out of this, let's call it a transactional faith. I thought that our obedience should have somehow earned his protection, and I conveniently forgot that scripture about persecution. Oh gosh, rebuilding trust meant admitting that mindset, first of all, which was really difficult, really, really difficult. And and then allowing God, who I had broken trust with, giving him that trust back so that he had room to work and change it. I had to I had to relearn who God is apart from leadership failures and human insecurities. It took time, and it took a whole lot of just honesty with myself and with him. It took a lot of tears and a lot of hard conversations. Trust did not return quickly. It did return because he is so gracious and he is so faithful, but it was not an easy journey.
And I almost imagine, at least kind of going through this, there's a level of, we almost kind of want to rush the process.
Absolutely.
We either A, feel like I should be building trust quicker, or B, we feel like, well, like God's angry at me because I'm taking so long. And, you know, one of the things that I'm always drawn to in the Gospels is how Jesus, when he's working with the disciples, he asks questions, and I want the answers, but he constantly asks them questions, and then sometimes would have them wrestle with the answer without giving them the answer. And to me, that shows a level of, he knows the process and he's okay with us struggling, sounds bad, but like working through that process to build something better. And so there's that level of, yes, it takes time, but God is okay with that.
Yes.
And also, you don't need to rush it because he knows that it takes time to build something better. What do you think is like one of the biggest hurdles that people face when trying to rebuild that trust?
The biggest one is probably that unresolved bitterness because it feels justified. And when the hurt is that deep and that real, and especially when it's public, it can feel, it can almost feel wrong to just let it go because it's like if you release it, it minimizes that injustice that you were dealt. And then there's the fear behind all of that too, fear of trusting church leaders again, fear of trusting church members again, fear of trusting God, fear of believing so deeply to your core, and then being completely and totally disappointed again. And that fear makes it really tempting to try and keep God at arm's length rather than risk another heartbreak.
I've worked with enough and also know enough to know that sometimes that bitterness is something that you like you said, and you worded it perfectly, just this idea of you're almost letting the person get away if I don't hold on to this. Like no one else knows what I've been through, and if I don't pursue this, they get away with it. And it's hard for us to realize that God in the end is the ultimate judge. But we want to see those things happen now. There are so many, and I'm sure you've experienced this working within the school systems and working with a lot of teens that deal with anxiety and stuff. Some of that stuff is just built on the hurts that they've experienced, just holding on to them and not being able to let go or feeling like they can't let go of them. So kind of like looking at how you're working with students, have you ever come across any students that deal or have dealt with church hurt or spiritual disappointment or maybe even just some type of broken trust? Like how does that show up in young people differently than adults? Because maybe some of the people that are listening to this, they work with adults on a regular basis. You work with students on a regular basis. So what does it look like that's kind of different?
Teens internalize hurt very differently because they're still forming their identity. Adults, or at least in my case, I'll speak for myself, I won't speak for everybody. I'll get ticked off and I'll think something like, that was really wrong. Why did that happen? Where teens don't think that way. They internalize it and they say, what's wrong with me? So hurt, it amplifies their insecurity and their anxiety, and it can really impact their desire to be people pleasers because it teaches them that belonging is conditional and spiritual spaces aren't truthfully emotionally safe. And the vast majority of teens won't verbalize that hurt, most of the time because they don't know how. Instead, they just shut down. They stop trusting authority. They stop asking questions of any kind, but especially about faith. And most of the time, they carry a lot of shame because, again, they don't have the language to communicate all of this that's going on inside of them. Because a lot of times we forget that they're not yet, their brain hasn't fully developed yet. And we forget what it's like to be a kid. And we forget just because they're in an adult sized body, they are not an adult. And I'm sorry if you're a teen listening to this, I know you're probably getting salty, but hard truth, okay?
No, I'm not.
Right. Um, So, we forget that they don't have these skills yet that we do. And we take for granted that we have those skills and they don't.
Yeah, I mean that's a really great point. I have two daughters. I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old. Do you have kids?
I do.
Okay. How old?
I have a little girl who's 8 and a little boy who just turned 10. We're in
My
double
goodness.
digits.
Almost a teenager.
Oh
Are
no.
you ready?
We are fully in the preteen years.
Okay. That's good, easing into it.
I don't know about easing.
Yeah. He just kind of jumped right in.
Yes.
But for me, one of the things that I had to learn with my girls is that they're still, as you said, just the development. But even like with kids, sometimes it's easier because they're little bodies. They're playing with toys. They're all that kind of stuff. I mean, I work with students on a regular basis, and sometimes I have to remind myself that very same thing. And so that's such a great point because sometimes as a young teen, I mean, I have students that have been through the ringer, and even though, as you said, they're still developing up here, they've been pushed into adulthood more quicker than they ever should have because of family choices and life choices and all that kind of stuff. The way that they hold that anxiety and the way that they hold that fear and that anger and those thoughts, man, that's important for us to remember. So I really appreciate you sharing that. So like, what is health look like? I know for you it was a long journey. Let's say someone's listening to this and they're like, I don't know if I can trust again, but like what's a good first step for that person that starts easing them into that healing process? Maybe it's not jumping in right away, but maybe it's like that first toe touch to the water. What would you say is a good first step for someone that's trying to rebuild trust? They just want to do it carefully.
So, healthy trust is discerning. It doesn't rush that commitment, but it doesn't completely shut down either. And for me, it meant allowing my faith to grow privately before I was willing to commit to a public space and a church community again. It meant really sitting back and observing the character of the church members and the leadership over time and giving them the opportunity to show me that they were consistent so that it rebuilt my confidence in them and in the church.
It kind of sounds like you're saying like it has to be earned. Like we don't just give it away. And I feel like sometimes because it's a church culture, we almost feel like we have to. And so that's a really great point, is using that discernment. I mean, God's given us discernment for a reason. And it's important for us to use it, especially in his church. You're not offending God by using his gifts even amongst his people. I think more than anything, God cares about the health of someone and their spiritual walk than the outward focus, the whitewashed tombs. So if someone's listening to this and they're hurt, maybe deeply guarded, what would you want them to hear about their worth, their faith, their future? And especially like when trust feels risky, what is the big thing you would want them to walk away with? Because you've been sharing a bit about some of the things that you talk about with the students and even hinted a little bit of what you talk about in the podcast. So kind of put on your anxious teen podcast hat right now. If you have someone that's listening that's deeply hurt and guarded, what would you want to have them walk away with?
So I want to speak directly to the audience for just a minute. If you have been hurt by your church or by people in your church's leadership, it is okay. You have permission to be guarded. You have permission to be hesitant. Being cautious doesn't mean you've lost your faith. It just means your heart's been wounded. And unfortunately, that is part of the human experience this side of heaven. Allow yourself to feel that pain, but do not wallow in it. Your worth is not measured by a pastor. It's not measured by a church's approval in any way. We are only here to seek God's approval. Give your heart to God and let him minister to your soul. Don't make the mistake I made by holding on to bitterness for years. Wasted years. Trust God. Trust Him to work through your pain and make your trial a blessing, because He will, if you give Him the space to move, because God is a gentleman.
Good. That's good. Thank you so much for sharing that and for opening yourself up. I realize sometimes when it comes to these things, we feel like, everyone's sharing their deep hurts on podcasts and stuff, but it's a moment of vulnerability. Even for you to come on here and we only know each other from a few emails back and forth. There's a level of honor, I feel, that you would even share this with my podcast group, because it's a level of you opening yourself up vulnerably. And so I thank you for that. And I think, there's so much for them to walk away with from this episode. And my hope is anyone that's listening to this, you leave this episode with hope rather than more bitterness, more hurt, and just having the rehash. Yes. That you hear Kristen's story and you're like, hey, it's going to be a process. It's going to take time, but I want that healing. I don't want what those people did to become my story. My story is going to be greater than that. And so thank you for coming on and sharing that. Now, for everyone that's been listening and you hear the voice, you hear the wisdom, you hear the guidance, would you kind of tell people where they can find you, where they can find out more about you, anything that you would like to promote and share and direct people to?
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And y'all, any wisdom that you hear does not come from me. It is Holy Spirit. It is not me. Do not be fooled. But yeah, if you want to stay connected, the best way to find me is on my podcast, Anxious Christian Teen. I also have a website. It's anxiouschristianteen.com. You can find all of the ways to stay in touch and get in contact with me there.
Awesome. And we'll have all that information in the show notes and the description as well. But again, one more time, thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story, but then also sharing the hope that's even greater than this story. And so thank you for joining me. And for you guys that are tuning in, thank you guys for watching this, whether it's your first time here or your 100th time here. Thank you so much for watching these videos. And if you hear anything that really sticks out, you see these videos and it really ministers to you, or you think of someone else that it could really minister to, do me a favor and share it. And then also subscribe to get more of this content and to make sure that other pastors, leaders, and other people hear these things that they need to hear so they can understand that the church can be healthier than sometimes the way that it's run. Again, thank you for joining me here. Again, this is Voices from the Field, part of Beyond the Numbers podcast. Let's work together to grow beyond the numbers and to become more Christ-like. Thank you.